A report like this in Google Analytics 4 can pretty much tell us the summary of our performance in any given period. But how do we see whether we are actually performing better or worse as opposed to another period? And that's why I particularly love time series reports, because they give us a progression, the progression of our metrics, of our KPIs in time. And so we can visually and immediately see whether we're performing better or worse, whether we are progressing or whether we're declining. Google Analytics 4 already comes with certain time series. As a matter of fact, each report, each and every page comes with both a report and potentially a time series like this. So we can already see the progression of these metrics and each value in time. Also in the home page, we can have the same thing. We can select the metric and we see how this metric is progressing over time, and so whether we're getting better or whether we're getting worse. However, as you know, Google Analytics 4 comes pretty much as a naked tool, in the sense that the standard report and pre-templated reports are pretty basic and not much flexible. However, we can use the explore section to create our own report. And so, for example, let's go into the explore report. Let's create a new blank report and let's start creating our time series. And so time series, let's first select the visualization line chart, and now we can start selecting our respectively dimensions and metrics. And so, for example, let's see and let's try to understand how we have been performing in terms of device category. So in other words, mobile devices as opposed to tablet and as opposed to desktop. And so let's select device category, and then very basically let's just select the total users. Now let's just create our first report, double click on the first one or drag and drop it, and then the same thing for the metrics under the values. You either double click or you drag and drop it. And then we have the progression of our metrics. So this is pretty easy to understand because we just have very few values. Being the device category, we can only see mobile, desktop, tablet, and in this case also smart TV, and how many users we got for each and every device. Now, this is pretty much standard. As you can see, we have a lot of device traffic as opposed to, for example, desktop. This is pretty much normal in the hotel industry. However, if we change the metric, and so, for example, we select the purchase or conversion, I just go for purchase in this case because I want to see specifically the bookings. Or let me actually grab also another metric, which is purchase revenue. Let's import it, and then let's just try to swap total users with purchases. And then we see that, for example, desktop is much higher, or at least in line, as opposed to mobile. And this is pretty much normal because most times people land on our website through a mobile device, but then they do not convert eventually in the first place. And if they come back and if they decide to book, they might want to do it from a more comfortable device, which is of course desktop. And so if you have a situation like this, for example, you might want to try to entice people to convert in the first place when they are on mobile. And so you might want to push for mobile rates, for example. I'm not saying that is going to work, but this is definitely something that you can try. Especially you can do so if you see that you don't have many returning visitors. Otherwise, and this is what I will most of the times suggest doing, try to get these people back on your channels, on your website, with some retargeting campaign. Another interesting thing about time series, so let's get back to total users, is something that you might have jump onto, like an initiative, like a marketing initiative, or for example, you launch a new campaign on Google, on Facebook, or an email newsletter, whether they had an impact on your progression. And so, for example, let's say that here you might have sent a newsletter and this is the result. So you got much more traffic coming through. Did that traffic turn into customers? And that's why I also suggest keeping a log of the changes. Meaning if you launch a new initiative, keep track of it so that you can relate your performance to any initiative, any changes that might have happened in your marketing landscape.